Open Book The Forgotten Birthday. Chapter 1 The Candle That Wouldn't Light. Birthdays were supposed to feel magical. That's what everyone said. A day when the air seemed sweeter, when even the morning sun felt like it rose just for you. A day filled with balloons, frosting, ribbons, and laughter that lingered into the night. But this morning felt different. The cupcake sat in the center of the desk like a small, lonely monument. Plain chocolate. A single white candle leaned slightly to the side, as if it were tired from waiting all night. The child had placed it there the evening before, sneaking into the kitchen with the soft thrill of anticipation, carefully plucking one cupcake from the tin and hiding it away. A secret treat for the morning. This was the plan. They would wake early, light the candle, and hear footsteps rushing in, Mom's voice, Dad's smile, maybe even a small gift wrapped in shiny paper. But now the house was quiet. The match flared. The child's eyes reflected the spark. They lowered it gently to the candle's wick. For a heartbeat, the flame caught, a tiny miracle flickering in the dim room. But then, pfft! Smoke curled upward, thin and gray, like a question mark dissolving into the air. The candle went dark. No footsteps approached. No cheerful voices. No chorus of "Happy Birthday" sung off-key. The child sat perfectly still, heart thumping in the silence. They leaned closer, whispering to the cupcake, "Happy birthday to me." The words didn't echo. They fell flat, like heavy stones dropped into a bottomless well. The house was alive with morning routines, the faint hum of the fridge, the tick of the kitchen clock, the sound of Dad's shoes by the door, but none of those noises belonged to them. Not today. Maybe Mom was busy. Maybe Dad had forgotten. Maybe everyone had. The candle remained unlit, a pale reminder that sometimes the world forgets the people who most need to be remembered. And for the first time, on what was supposed to be the brightest morning of the year, the child wondered if their birthday had been erased. Chapter 2 The Empty Breakfast Table. The smell of toast drifted from the kitchen, warm and buttery, curling into the hallway where the child hesitated. Normally, birthday mornings began with pancakes, or waffles, or at the very least a chocolate chip muffin with a candle stuck right in the middle. But this morning, only toast. The child padded into the kitchen, feet cold on the linoleum floor. The table was already set: 2 plates, 2 cups of coffee, 1 half-empty juice glass. Mom was at the counter, phone tucked between shoulder and ear, her hands busy buttering bread. Dad flipped through a newspaper, brow furrowed, lips pressed tight in concentration. Either of them looked up. The child slid into a chair, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice. Mom laughed at something the person on the phone said. "Yes, I'll be there by noon," she promised, scribbling notes on the back of an envelope. Dad grunted at the sports section, shaking his head like the fate of the world depended on who had won last night's game. The child poked at their toast. Plain, no sprinkles, no candle, no card beside the plate. Just bread, browned at the edges. They cleared their throats softly. "Good morning," Dad hummed absently. Mom waved a hand, still distracted by her call. That was all. The words, "Happy Birthday," were missing, 3 tiny syllables that should have wrapped around the morning like a gift. Without them, the silence felt heavier. Maybe they're saving it, the child thought. Maybe they're pretending not to remember because they're planning something big. But doubt was a clever thief. It crept in quickly, whispering, or maybe they just forgot. The child swallowed hard, forcing down the toast that suddenly felt like cardboard in their mouth. When Mom hung up, she finally turned, brushing crumbs from her hands. "Big day today," she said, smiling faintly. "Lots to do." The child's heart lifted for a second. She remembered. But then Mom added, "Groceries, errands, a meeting at work. Don't forget to pack your homework." And just like that, the little flicker of hope went out. The child chewed quietly, staring at the clock. Each tick of the second hand felt like a reminder. The morning was slipping away, and so far, their birthday was invisible. Chapter 3 School Without Smiles. School was supposed to be different. At least, that's what the child told themselves as they trudged down the sidewalk, backpack heavy against their shoulders. Friends always remembered birthdays. Someone always shouted it across the playground, or sang it at recess, or handed over a scribbled card made from notebook paper and crayons. It would be okay. It had to be. But when they walked into class, no one looked up. The room buzzed with chatter, pencils scratching, chairs scraping. The teacher greeted students with her usual brisk smile, then launched straight into instructions about math problems and spelling words. Not a single "Happy birthday!" Not even a glance that lingered a little longer. The child slid into their seat, waiting. Surely someone would notice. They glanced at the clock, then at their friends' faces, scanning for recognition. Nothing. During recess, they tried to hint. "Guess what today is?" they asked a classmate, trying to sound casual. The friend shrugged. "Tuesday." The child forced a laugh. "Yeah, Tuesday." Another friend was busy with jump rope. Another was trading stickers. Nobody looked their way. The child's heart sank further with every minute. When lunchtime arrived, they opened their lunchbox slowly, hoping for some sign that mom or dad had slipped in a cupcake, or a note, or even a piece of candy with "Happy Birthday" scribbled on a napkin. But inside, only the usual: a sandwich, an apple, a small pack of crackers. Their throat tightened. They chewed quietly while the cafeteria roared with laughter and shouts. By the end of the school day, the child's hope had worn so thin it was nearly invisible. Maybe it wasn't just a mistake. Maybe it wasn't just forgetfulness. Maybe, for everyone else, this day was just another Tuesday. The teacher dismissed the class with a smile. "Don't forget your assignments." The child gathered their books slowly, clutching them to their chest. Walking home, the world felt heavier. Every step echoed with the thought, if no one remembers, does my birthday even matter? Chapter 4: The Longest Afternoon. The walk home stretched longer than usual, every step dragging beneath the weight of disappointment. The child kicked at pebbles on the sidewalk, watching them skip ahead, as though even the stones had somewhere more important to be. The neighborhood houses stood tall and cheerful, front porches decorated with pumpkins, flower beds still clinging to color, wind chimes tinkling in the breeze. But today, the cheerful sounds felt hollow, as though the whole world was in on the secret. Birthdays weren't always remembered. When the child reached their own house, the curtains were drawn, and the front yard looked the same as it had that morning. No colorful streamers, no balloons tied to the mailbox. The door creaked as it opened. The air inside smelled faintly of detergent and leftover coffee. "Homework first," Dad called from the living room, not looking up from his laptop. The child set their backpack down, dragging feet toward the desk. Books spilled across the surface, a mountain of spelling words and math sheets. The pencil felt heavy in their hand. They stared at the page, but the numbers blurred together. Minutes turned into hours. The clock on the wall ticked mercilessly, each second louder than the last. With each tick, hope faded a little more. Once they heard Mom whispering in the hallway, her voice low and hurried. "No, not yet. Just keep him busy." The child froze, ears straining. Him? Busy? For a flicker of a moment, their heart leapt. Maybe she was talking about them. Maybe something was being planned. But then the sound of laughter, Mom's, short and casual, cut through the air. The tone was too ordinary, too practiced, as though she were simply chatting about groceries or schedules. The child sank back into the chair. Maybe it had nothing to do with them at all. Maybe they were clinging to threads that weren't even there. When the math sheet was finished, they sat quietly, staring at the empty lines of the spelling list. The house creaked with evening sounds, the hum of the dishwasher, Dad typing, the faint shuffle of footsteps upstairs. But not one word, not one glance, hinted at celebration. The afternoon bled into dusk, shadows stretching long across the floorboards. The child curled into the corner of the couch, hugging a pillow tightly, watching the daylight slip away. It was the longest afternoon of their life. Chapter 5: The Lonely Wish. By the time the sun began to set, the child's chest felt heavy, their throat thick with unspoken words. They slipped quietly into the kitchen. On the counter sat the same cupcake from the morning, its candle still unlit. They placed it carefully on the table, dim orange light from the window spilling across the frosting. The shadows of evening stretched long fingers across the room, wrapping around them like a blanket. For a moment, they imagined how it should have been. Dad carrying in a cake too big to hold in one hand, Mom clapping along as voices rose in song, friends laughing, balloons bobbing against the ceiling. But instead, there was only silence. The child struck another match, hand trembling. This time, the candle caught. The flame danced weakly, a tiny point of light in the dim kitchen. They leaned forward, lips quivering. "I wish," their voice cracked, soft as a secret, "that I won't be forgotten." The flame flickered as though listening. Hot tears blurred their vision. They shut their eyes tight, blowing out the candle with a shaky breath. Smoke curled upward, dissolving into the air. For a heartbeat, they expected applause. A voice. A laugh. Something. But nothing came. They sat there, staring at the thin thread of smoke until it vanished completely. That was the moment the child decided birthdays weren't magic. Birthdays were just another day. And yet, a tiny corner of their heart still clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, there was more to come. Chapter 6. The Strange Distraction. It was after dinner, plain spaghetti and salad, nothing special, when Mom suddenly looked up. "Sweetheart," she said lightly, "could you run to the store for me? Just down the block. We need milk." The child blinked. "Now?" Mom smiled quickly, too quickly. "Yes, it won't take long," Dad added. "And maybe walk around a little. Get some fresh air. You've been inside all afternoon." The child frowned. Fresh air? At night? And hadn't they just bought milk yesterday? But both parents were watching closely, their smiles too stretched, their eyes darting between each other like they were passing a secret. The child's stomach nodded. It felt like they were being pushed away. "Sure," they whispered, pulling on their jacket. The air outside was cool and sharp, the first hints of autumn brushing the leaves with red and gold. Streetlights flickered on, casting pools of yellow light across the sidewalk. As they walked, the quiet pressed close around them. Houses glowed with warm windows. Families laughed inside, voices carrying faintly into the night. The child's hands curled into fists inside their pockets. Why would they send me out? Why tonight of all nights? The grocery store was nearly empty, its aisles echoing with the hum of refrigerators. They grabbed the carton of milk and paid quickly, clutching the bag as though it might anchor them in the silence. On the walk back, something shifted. The street seemed too quiet. Porch lights flickered on, then off again. Curtains twitched as if someone had been watching. The child slowed, heart thumping. Something was happening. They just didn't know what. Chapter 7. The Quiet Street. The milk carton felt heavier with each step, its cold pressing through the thin plastic bag and into the child's fingers. They shifted it to the crook of an arm and kept walking, scanning the neighborhood as if the houses might whisper answers. The street had a different kind of quiet now. Not the peaceful kind, but a quiet with edges, like someone had pressed pause on the world and forgot to hit play again. A dog that always barked at passers-by stood alert and silent behind a fence, tail barely moving. Porch swings that usually creaked with evening motion hung still. Even the wind chimes, which tinkled at the slightest breeze, were mute, heavy. The child slowed near the corner. Mr. Alvarez's porch light winked on, then off, then on again. The child squinted at it, took a cautious step forward. The light stayed. Okay. Just a sensor. Or maybe not. The bag crackled. The milk thumped softly against their side. They passed a hedge, and in the reflections of a shiny mailbox they saw their own face, too small in a world that felt suddenly enormous. Up ahead, a car door clicked. The child's head snapped toward the sound, but no one was there, just a neighbor's sedan glinting under the street lamp, empty. A curtain twitched in the house across the road. Another on the next block. Somewhere, a whispered laugh shot out, cut short, like a hiccup the world tried to swallow back. A prickle ran down the child's neck. They gripped the milk tighter and told themselves to stop being dramatic. It was just a Tuesday night. If it weren't for the ache in their chest, for the weight of the day, for the way their name hadn't been spoken, not once, maybe they wouldn't have noticed any of this. Maybe they would have floated through the evening on autopilot, like any other night. But birthdays were supposed to sharpen everything. The child could feel the shape of the day pressing into them, a strange mold that didn't fit. A few houses from their own, the child paused. Their family's windows were dark. Completely dark. No glow from the living room TV. No golden slant from the kitchen over the sink. Even the porch light, always on by dusk, always, was dark. A breath snagged in their throat. They stepped onto the walkway, each footfall sounding too loud against the concrete. It felt wrong to approach a dark house that was supposed to be home. They stared at the door. It was closed, the welcome mat straightened, as if someone had fussed with it just minutes ago. The air smelled faintly of cut grass, of a neighbor's barbecue, of the cool minerals that rise from the ground after the sun lets go. "Mom?" the child whispered, as if the name could carry through wood. No answer. A moth pinned itself to the porch column, wings fanning. The child's free hand hovered near the doorknob, then dropped. They took a small step back, eyeing the windows for movement. Nothing. They thought of the morning, the unlit candle, the plain of their parents' faces at breakfast, the silence at school, the lunchbox with only the usual things, the way the teacher didn't even glance their way with knowing softness. They thought of the wish whispered to a wavering flame, "Please don't let me be forgotten." And then the errand. The sudden cheerfulness that had felt like an exit rather than an invitation. "Go get milk. Take your time. Get some air." The way their parents' eyes had flickered around the room as if searching for something that wasn't there. Or avoiding everything that was. The child swallowed, their mouth dry. They had wanted proof that their birthday mattered. Proof of love. But what if the quiet that waited behind the door was exactly what it seemed, a hollow space, a house without a celebration, a life without a marker where one should have been? They stepped closer, fingers trembling as they reached for the knob. Their hand paused on the cool metal. If the house was dark because no one was inside, if this was just another end to an ordinary day, then they didn't want to know. They didn't want to confirm that the wish had floated up and evaporated like smoke, that birthdays were a story other people got to live. The milk carton slipped in the bag, thudding, tilting. They caught it with their knee, wincing at the sound. Still nothing moved inside. No footsteps. No voices. The child forced themselves to breathe. They imagined the worst, and then, because they couldn't help it, they imagined something else, a reason for the darkness. A reason for the quiet. A reason for their parents' strange smiles. But hope was a dangerous thing tonight. It had battered itself against closed doors all day. It had bruised itself on silence. A soft scuff came from somewhere behind them. The child turned. An empty sidewalk. A steady street lamp. A plastic tricycle tipped on its side in the neighbor's yard, one wheel slowly rotating to a stop. They faced the door again. Enough. They had to know. They pressed their palm flat against the wood, feeling the faint memory of sunshine caught there, of heat lingering from the day, and then they turned the knob. It opened with a sigh. Inside, the house was a shadow, the shape of familiar furniture remade into low lumps and lines. The smell of cinnamon touched the air for a moment, then hid again behind the smell of detergent and the faint metallic tang of the sink. The child's breath pulled in the space before them, cold and a little shaky. "Hello?" they tried, stronger this time. The quiet answered. They stepped across the threshold, closing the door carefully behind them to keep from waking the silence. The hallway felt longer than it should have, stretched like gum. The milk swung in its bag, bumping their leg, a steady, ordinary reminder that life had errands to run whether or not it remembered celebrations. They took 3 steps, then 4. Their eyes adjusted. The living room was a soft absence, couches shaped like sleeping animals, the coffee table a dark raft. The child took one more step, and the house clicked. Not a light. Not yet. Something smaller. A door latch? A whisper? A caught breath? The child froze, senses straining wide, open like windows. The quiet pressed in. The quiet had a heartbeat. They swallowed, set the milk gently on the floor so it wouldn't swing, and reached for the wall where the light switch waited. Their fingers found it and hovered. They almost didn't want to flip it. They almost wanted to turn around and leave, to let the dark stay, to let the question be better than the answer. But they were tired of questions. The switch snapped. Darkness exploded into color. Chapter 8: The Door That Opens. Surprise! Light poured across the room all at once, warm and golden, collapsing the shadows with a rush. The quiet shattered into laughter, into cheers, into the thunder of hands slapping together and voices bending into their name, into that word, happy, at last, at last, at last. Balloons lifted toward the ceiling, bobbing like bright planets. Streamers cascaded down. A banner stretched across the far wall, hand-painted and slightly crooked, loud with color and love, happy birthday. The child staggered back a step, heart ricocheting, eyes wide and burning with too many feelings at once. Their name bounced through the air, shouted by voices they knew, neighbors and classmates and teachers and the person from the library who always stamped their books with a wink. Faces burst forth from behind furniture, from the corners of doorways, from the hallway, from a kitchen that now flashed with frosting and sprinkles and tiers of cake, from behind a mountain of gifts wrapped in silly paper. There were silly hats. There were horns that squeaked. There were smiles that felt like summer in a single look. Mom stepped forward first, tears glassing her eyes. Her smile wobbled and turned bright as a candle flame. Dad was right beside her, his grin tipping into a laugh that came out as a relieved breath. They both opened their arms without a word, and the child flew into that space as though it were a door to a world where love had been waiting this whole time. Their faces pressed into hair and cheeks and shoulders. Someone's sweater smelled like laundry and cinnamon. Someone's cheek was damp. "We didn't forget," Mom whispered into the child's ear, voice breaking and laughing at the same time. "Sweetheart, we never forgot." "Not for a second," Dad added. His voice was rough, soft at the edges. "We've been thinking of nothing else all day." The child's throat tried to make words and couldn't. A laugh bubbled up with a hiccup. A tear that had hung around since the lonely wish finally slipped free and landed on Dad's collar. "You sent me for milk," the child managed, half accusation, half wonder, utterly bewildered by the way the world had just spun on its axis. "Why did you? How did you?" "So we could do this," Mom said, sweeping her hand wide at the miracle they'd made out of a living room. "You were so determined this morning, up early, too quiet. We couldn't ruin the surprise. We wanted to make it perfect." "Nothing was perfect," the child said, but there was no heat in it, only a gasp of relief, a little tremble. "School was, no one said anything. And breakfast, and I thought." The words wobbled and slipped. Mom bent close, eyes shining. "We asked them," she confessed softly. "Your teacher, your friends. We asked everyone to keep quiet today so it could all land right here, all at once. One big burst. It had to be tonight," Dad said, squeezing the child's shoulders. "Some people could only come after work. Your friend's mom could bring them by 7. The neighbor's band had a gig and promised to swing over with the speakers exactly at 8. We had a timeline carved into a mountain, kiddo." The child blinked hard. A laugh cracked open and they scrubbed at their face with the heel of their hand. "I thought I was forgotten," they said honestly. Saying it out loud felt like setting down a heavy box they had carried forever. The floor didn't fall away. It held. Mom and Dad's faces tightened, the way faces do when they're being squeezed by love and regret at the same time. "I'm sorry," Mom whispered. "I didn't realize. I should have not let the morning be so quiet. I kept telling myself the surprise would fix everything. I didn't think about how it would feel while you were waiting." The child breathed in, and the whole house came with it, the frosting and paper and warm bodies and cinnamon, the citrus fizz of punch, the rubbery whispers of balloons rubbing shoulders. The breath came out steadier. I'm okay, they said, and found it was true. I'm okay now. Around them, the party began moving again, the first shock melting into motion, into friends tugging them toward the couch, into neighbors calling for the music, into someone accidentally popping a balloon and then covering their ears, laughing. A cluster of classmates waved sheepishly. Sorry, we pretended not to know, one of them blurted, eyes wide and earnest. Your mom asked us to. She even brought muffins for the teacher's lounge so we wouldn't slip. You did not, the child said, spinning to gape at Mom. Mom lifted her chin, guilty and proud at once. A strategic bribe, she admitted. Not my proudest moment, but a very effective one. The child laughed, the sound caught between disbelief and joy. You all kept such straight faces, they said to their friends. You were like spies. A classmate puffed up. We practiced. Another nodded. I almost cracked in math. I had to bite my tongue when you sat next to me. I bit my sleeve. A third confessed, revealing a damp cuff. They all dissolved into giggles. The child's teacher stepped forward, her usual brisk calm softened. You were very brave today, she said quietly, so only the child could hear. I could tell you were hurting. I'm glad you didn't know. Surprises ask us to carry a little weight before they let us drop it. The child looked at her for a moment and nodded. That was a fair trade, they decided, wait for wonder. The music sputtered to life near the bookshelf. Someone's dad, one of those neighbors who could fix anything with duct tape and a wink, had stacked 2 speakers on a side table and connected them to a phone with a tangled snake of cords. The first song boomed, then settled into the right level, crowd voices rising to match. People shifted into dancing, into a silly conga line that snaked around the coffee table and ducked under the banner. One of the neighbors spun an invisible lasso and pretend wrangled 2 laughing kids, who promptly pretended to be stubborn cows. Mom herded the child toward the kitchen. There's something else, she said, waggling her eyebrows with theatrical gravity. Actually, there are a few somethings. The kitchen, which had looked dim and ordinary from the hallway, had been transformed into a sugar cathedral. Cupcakes towered in bright spirals. Bowls of candies shone like jewels. A punch bowl burbled with soda fizz. And at the center, on a revolving cake stand that the child hadn't even known they owned, stood a cake so grand it made the morning's lone cupcake look like a fossil, a chocolate mountain layered with cream, rimmed with strawberries, frosted in a careful swirl that wrapped around the sides like a ribbon. Embedded at its crown were candles, too many to count at a glance, arranged in a constellation shaped like the child's initial. The child's mouth fell open. That can't be for me. What, this tiny thing? Dad said innocently, circling the cake as if appraising a new car. We thought about something bigger, but then we considered the structural integrity of the table. Mom elbowed him. Don't listen to him. We were going to buy one from the store, but then Mrs. Alvarez insisted on baking. She said store-bought frosting is an offense to joyful occasions. So she arrived with this, and all we could do was build supporting infrastructure around it. As if on cue, Mrs. Alvarez swept in, apron still dusted with powdered sugar, a wooden spoon tucked into the pocket like a scholar's pen. You like? She asked, eyes bright. I love, the child said, and meant it so fiercely that their voice came out as a whisper. It's the most beautiful cake I've ever seen. Mrs. Alvarez clasped her hands. Then you must make another wish, she declared. A proper one, with witnesses. And this time, no lonely candles. The child looked at the cake, then at the faces gathered now in the doorway and archway and behind the table, faces expectant and kind. Something unclenched in their chest. The child closed their eyes for a moment and saw the morning again, the unlit candle, their own reflection in a dark window, the way a wish made in an empty room felt like throwing a paper airplane with no wind. They opened their eyes to wind. Wait! Cried a voice from the hall. The child turned. Their best friend, late, apparently, was barreling in, cheeks flushed, hair askew, a gift bag banging against one knee. I missed the jump scare. You missed a very loud jump scare, someone said, laughing. The friends skidded to a stop, breathless. There was traffic, then my mom forgot the tape, then the dog. Never mind. I'm here. Happy birthday. The last two words were full and steady. They pulled the child into a hug that squeezed a squeak out of both of them. Now it's everyone, Dad announced. He clapped his hands. Positions! Candles! Lights! The room settled into the choreography families somehow know without practice. Someone dimmed the kitchen lights. The candles flared to life under Mrs. Alvarez's steady match, one by one catching and multiplying until the cake held a small galaxy. The child stared at all that light and felt their throat go strange again. Mom's hand found theirs and squeezed. Ready? She murmured. The child nodded. The singing began, a tangle of keys and tempos that somehow braided into a perfect rope. The child's name rose above the rest, said by so many mouths that it felt suddenly larger than a sound, felt like a place you could walk into and be held. Happy birthday to you. The child laughed in the middle of it, the kind of laugh that cracked and glimmered, and a few people laughed with them, and the song rolled on, ignorant of pitch, rich with love. Near the end, the volume swelled, a last lush note riding the candle's flicker. Make a wish, Mom whispered. The child closed their eyes. The quiet from before flickered through, a shadow passing over a field, and then it was gone. In its place, faces, lights, cinnamon, the shape of a banner, the thrum of music, the whisper of balloons. And beneath that, solid as bedrock, the two arms that had opened first. They made a wish that was not born from loneliness this time. They made a wish big enough to hold years. Then they opened their eyes and blew. The room exhaled with them. The candles guttered and went dark altogether, and the cheers rose like a flock, flapping up and circling the kitchen, landing on shoulders and hands. Dad whooped. Someone knocked a wooden spoon against a pot. The dog, who had been missing from this story and apparently belonged to a neighbor, barked once in solidarity, ears pricked high. Cut the cake! Shouted 3 different people. Wait! Shouted Mom, and everyone actually did, because she had that voice parents get that sounds like both a hug and a stop sign. Before cake, gifts. She winced at herself, grinning. I know. Sugar first is the rule. But we did a thing. Dad hustled into the living room and came back with a long, flat box wrapped in paper printed with tiny moons and stars. He set it on the table before the child with reverence. Open carefully, he said, cocking one eyebrow. Or don't. It's your day. The child slid fingers under the tape and peeled the paper slowly, savoring the rip only at the end. The lid lifted. Inside lay a scrapbook, thick and inviting, its cover a deep sky blue. The title was embossed in silver in letters that shimmered when tilted, The Year You Grew Into Your Name. The child's breath caught. They touched the cover with one careful fingerdip. It's not finished, Mom said quickly. We started it months ago. We kept it hidden like gremlins. Everyone added pages, family, friends, your teacher, Mrs. Alvarez. It's a map, I guess. Of you? The child opened to the first page. A photo of their first lost tooth, wide grin and a gap like a window. A bus pass from the first week of school. A sketch their friend had made of them during art class, cheeks round, hair wild, a superhero cape added for good measure. There were ticket stubs from the planetarium trip, a napkin from their favorite diner, a wrinkled scrap of paper where Dad had written a joke that was only funny because he told it 5 times wrong in a row on the day the bike finally stayed upright. The child's eyes blurred again, but the tears didn't feel like the morning's. Those had burned, these cooled and shone and made everything glisten like it had been varnished with light. We wanted you to have proof, Dad said, voice softer than the music. Proof that you are seen all the way through the year, not just on this day. Proof that happy birthday is something we stretch like taffy across the months. The child flipped another page. A small envelope was pasted there, labeled in a classmate's careful printing, open when you feel invisible. Another envelope from their teacher, open when you forget how brave you are. A photo of them flying a kite that had refused to climb for 3 tries and then had leapt at the 4th, and dragged them laughing down the beach. A message from the librarian in neat loops. The stories you love are making you, quietly, like rain on a garden. The child tried to speak. Nothing emerged. They closed the scrapbook gently and laid their palm flat on it, feeling the slight undulations of pasted items, the raised ridges of glue, the stubborn corners of tickets that refused to lie perfectly flat, like truth, they thought. I thought I was forgotten, they said, and the words didn't hurt now, they were just a marker of where they'd been. And you were making this. We were making this, Mom agreed. And a party, and a mess, and 100 small lies told with love. We are very sorry for the lies, Dad added, then stage whispered to the room. But admit it, the effect slaps. A wave of mock gasps and laughter rolled through the kitchen. Okay, Mom relented, laughing. Now cut the cake before Mrs. Alvarez disowns us. Mrs. Alvarez lifted her spoon warningly, smiling. I have standards, she said. The child cut. The first slice wobbled and lodged frosting on the knife in a thick curl. They passed it to Mom, then carved the second for Dad, then began distributing to outstretched plates, the cake vanishing slice by slice into a chorus of grateful noises and a few urgent reminders to use napkins. The child took their own piece last, sat on the edge of a chair, and let the first sweet bite dissolve. It tasted like chocolate and strawberries and the feeling of being found. The party expanded again, out of the kitchen and back into the living room, onto the porch where cooler night air slipped around bare arms, across the rug where someone set up a board game on fast forward, onto the hallway where coats hung in bright, overlapped waves. Laughter braided itself into everything. In the middle of it, the child stood with the scrapbook tucked under one arm like a treasure map and watched. They watched the neighbor's baby reach for a balloon and startle when it bumped their nose, then giggle. They watched their best friend tilt their head back to finish a joke that required the ceiling as a punchline. They watched their parents wrap their arms around each other without even realizing they'd done it. They felt full in a way that had nothing to do with cake. A little later, when the sugar buzz had risen and mellowed, when shoes had been kicked off and confetti had drifted into corners like colorful dust, Mom slid in beside the child and bumped shoulders gently. You okay? She asked. The child nodded. The movement felt anchored. I think, they said slowly, I learned something today. Even though it hurt. Mom's face turned toward them, listening. I learned that love can be quiet. And that sometimes the quiet is not emptiness, it's build-up. Like the hush before the orchestra starts, or the second where you're holding your breath underwater right before you burst up laughing. They glanced at Mom, searching to see if the metaphor landed. Mom's mouth trembled into a smile. That's a beautiful way to put it. It didn't feel beautiful this morning, the child admitted. I know, Mom said simply. And I'm sorry again for the part we played in that hurt. We thought the surprise would erase it, but pain doesn't erase, it transforms. If we're lucky. The child looked at the scrapbook, then at the banner. I think, they said, it transformed. From the doorway, Dad called, Photo time. Before the frosting relocates to the ceiling, and we have to repaint. People gathered, neighbors bent, friends jostled, parents flanked. Someone lifted the banner so it didn't cut across the frame. The child found themselves in the middle, hands full of the scrapbook, cheeks warm. A cousin, late to the party and dramatic by nature, crashed into the group at the last second and grinned so hard his eyes vanished. On 3! Dad called. 1, 2, wait, the child said, voice clear enough to catch the room. It quieted. Can we do 2 photos? One with everyone, and one with just Mom and Dad. A couple of teasing ahs grinned their way through the group. Absolutely, Dad said, throat thickening even on the single word. The first photo caught chaos. The neighbor's dog leaping just enough to blur, a balloon mid-bounce, a friend blinking, a great-aunt looking at the wrong camera. It was perfect. The second photo held stillness. Mom and Dad stepped in close. The scrapbook rested between them like a shared secret. The banner lowered to frame their heads like a crown. In that second, The child felt the whole day fold into itself, the lonely quiet and the explosion of light, the unlit wick and the galaxy of candles, the ache and the answer. The shutter clicked. And the door inside the child, which had been rattling all day, eased and settled into its frame, open. Chapter 9: The Party of a Lifetime. The party didn't fade after the cake. If anything, it grew louder, brighter, fuller. Music spilled from the speakers and tangled with the laughter until the two were indistinguishable. The living room became a dance floor, the porch an open-air lounge. Even the hallway hosted its own mini-adventure as kids discovered the stash of balloons and invented games on the spot. The child wandered from group to group, pulled like a current. Their classmates showed off silly dance moves, daring each other into exaggerated spins that sent hats flying. The neighbors' teenagers had organized an impromptu karaoke contest, their voices wobbling but their energy carrying them through. Someone had started a limbo line, and even the librarian from down the street bent backward under the broomstick with surprising agility, sending everyone into fits of laughter. The scrapbook never left the child's side. They clutched it to their chest when they weren't flipping through pages to show friends the contributions they'd made. "That's my note!" one classmate exclaimed proudly, pointing to a folded slip taped inside. "I almost ruined the surprise when I wrote it, but my mom reminded me to act normal." Another chimed in. "See that drawing? I stayed up extra late to finish it." The child's heart swelled with every confession, with every little reminder that this book wasn't just paper and glue. It was proof that they belonged to so many people, and that so many people belonged to them. Dad announced a game of charades, and the room divided into teams. Mom demonstrated the first clue, an exaggerated pantomime of baking a cake, which had everyone shouting, "Birthday!" in under 5 seconds. The child's turn came next, and they performed a dramatic interpretation of a dog chasing its tail, rolling on the floor until laughter drowned out the guesses. Then came presents. The table by the couch had been stacked with bags and boxes, each one marked with bows or paper that reflected the givers' personalities. A classmate had wrapped theirs in comic book pages. A neighbor had used shiny foil paper that glimmered under the lights. The child opened them slowly, savoring each one. A set of paints from an art-loving friend. A telescope from the neighbors who knew they liked the stars. A book of riddles from their teacher. Socks from Dad. "The practical gift," he teased, earning a groan and laughter all around. But none of it compared to the scrapbook, the first gift, the one that had already shifted something deep inside. As the night stretched on, the party settled into a warm rhythm. The younger kids curled into beanbags with fistfuls of candy. Adults leaned against doorframes, trading stories. Music softened into background hum. The child found themselves on the couch between Mom and Dad, the scrapbook open across their laps. Mom brushed a hand over their hair. "Do you forgive us for today?" The child looked at her, then at Dad, then at the galaxy of people scattered around the room, all of whom had kept a secret for them, just for tonight. "Yes," the child said softly. "Because it hurts less now." "It makes sense." But they hesitated. "Promise me something?" "Anything," Dad said at once. "Next year, even if you plan a surprise, just tell me happy birthday in the morning." "Just once." "Please?" Mom's eyes shimmered. She kissed the top of their head. "Always," she whispered. The child leaned into them both, and for the first time all day, their chest felt completely unburdened. Chapter 10: The Forever Memory. By the time the last guests left, the house looked like a carnival had swept through and decided to stay. Streamers dangled from lamps. Plates with crumbs of frosting perched on every surface. The floor was a confetti mosaic of popped balloons and torn wrapping paper. Mom sighed, surveying the chaos with hands on hips. "Tomorrow's problem," she declared. Dad laughed, scooping up a handful of confetti and letting it rain back down. "It's a beautiful mess." The child, exhausted but glowing, curled up on the couch with the scrapbook spread open on their knees. They traced the silver letters on the cover, letting their fingers linger. The book smelled faintly of glue and paper and cake frosting, a scent they knew they'd remember forever. As the house quieted again, this time filled with the gentle quiet of contentment rather than the heavy silence of absence, the child realized how different it felt. Earlier, silence had been an enemy. Now, it was just a soft landing after a day too full to hold. They thought back to the lonely wish they'd made at sunset, whispered to a single candle. "Please don't let me be forgotten." And now, sitting between their parents, scrapbook in hand, heart swollen with proof of love, they realized something. They hadn't just been remembered. They'd been celebrated, loudly, messily, joyfully. The child turned to Mom and Dad. "I think I'll always remember today. Even the sad parts." "That's good," Dad said gently. "Because the sad parts make the joy sharper. You'll carry both, and that's what makes the memory whole." The child nodded slowly. They thought of their classmates' secret notes, their teacher's envelope, Mrs. Alvarez's cake, their best friend crashing through the doorway, the banner, the lights, the psalm. They thought of the candle that wouldn't light, the empty breakfast table, the long afternoon. It was all part of the same story. "Someday," the child said thoughtfully, "I'll make sure no one else feels forgotten on their birthday. I'll remember every single one." Mom's smile was tender. "That's the best gift you could give." Dad ruffled their hair. "And knowing you, you'll make it big. Balloons, confetti cannons, maybe even a marching band." The child laughed, imagining it, and then yawned, the day finally catching up. Mom closed the scrapbook gently. "Bedtime, birthday star." The child hugged the book tight and carried it upstairs. In their room, they placed it carefully on the nightstand beside the dark cupcake, the one that had started it all. The candle leaned, still unlit. The child struck a match one last time. The flame flared and caught, the wick glowing bright. They watched it burn steady for a long moment, the small light filling the quiet. Then they blew it out, the smoke curling like a ribbon in the air. But this time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like a promise, a forever memory, sealed with flame and laughter and love.